Okay, another spontaneous style video. I'm doing a number of these. I'm going to talk about two things I have and have had my whole life but were diagnosed later. So the first one is asthma. Let's see if I can spell this right. Mild. So I have mild asthma. And what does that mean? Well, I'll get to that in a second. I'm going to put the second thing on here because these two are intertwined for me. ADHD. And this, I was diagnosed as the mild to severe range. So when you see me fidgeting in videos, this is related to my ADHD. And they're not things I can get rid of. I've come to accept that at this point in my life. I'm 28 years old. These things are with me for all my life. And I've learned they can, when learning what they meant, I think they could and still are terrifying at times. Asthma more so than ADHD. I've learned to integrate my ADHD. It is I would actually call ADHD a superpower. I think it gets a really bad rap from people who don't understand it or don't have it, and then kind of dehumanize those of us who have it. And asthma, or they'll say like, oh, it's not a real thing. And it's like, dehumanizing tactics. Maybe non-ADHD, but then are you incorporating the H? A lot of people like to be like, oh, I have some ADD or ADHD, and they don't actually have any. The H makes ADHD a bit different than attention, deficiency disorder or something like that, and then the H is hyperactivity. I don't remember if that's actually correct or not. Yeah. And so let's start with asthma. So both of these, they're related by the H component, which stands for hyperactivity. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. There. I don't have ADD, so why would I remember that? Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And so, asthma and ADHD for me are related through the hyperactivity component because I have way too much energy, like as you can see sometimes on my YouTube channel, like a good portion of the time. And so that's nice because then I do a bunch of exercise. But the problem with doing a bunch of exercise, is my asthma, not always, and it didn't start off as being exercise related, but later on that's kind of the nature it took. It is not currently all exercise related, and so I would describe asthma best as I have difficulty breathing. When I was a kid, I would have to lie down. We had to get a friend's inhaler because I couldn't breathe and we didn't know what to do, and my mom figured out it was asthma, and one of our friends had an inhaler, and so I had to use an inhaler growing up, and so it just means I can't get enough oxygen. And how does that manifest? So I was an athlete, and asthma, so it's not some melodrama where I have like an asthma attack at the finish line and finish first or something like that. It's not reality. That's fiction. Though there might be people who have that melodrama in their life naturally, nonfiction. But for me, it has affected sports races, but it affects it to the point of I can't finish the race. So there was one severe asthma attack. I'm going to focus on examples because it gives the best kind of understanding of how it works for me. I was in a swim meet. Terrible place to have an asthma attack in a pool, because my asthma attacks, it means my muscles aren't getting enough oxygen, and I start to lose feeling and not be able to move my arms and my legs. So I was swimming in the pool, not in edge lane, which means my body was starting to shut down because I didn't have enough oxygen. I was starting to lose feeling in my arms and legs, and I was starting to lose mobility in my arms and legs, which if I'm in a pool and I lose mobility in my arms and my legs and it spreads to my chest, because that also gets hit is my chest, that means I can't breathe anymore. I go underwater and I drown. And so I did not finish the race, obviously, because I value my life, and it's not like running where there's plenty of air. No, in a pool, you go under, you don't get the air. So I swam to the edge of the pool, got out, and I think I had my inhaler with me, and like sat out. My coach, for some reason, was like, get back in the pool, finish it. Like after I'd been sitting there for a couple minutes, it doesn't take a couple minutes to recover from that. It can take sometimes hours, and the psychological toll can be days to weeks to months to actually recover from a severe enough asthma attack. And so I just remember being like, what coach says that to someone who, like, literally you're asking them, she was asking me to get back in the pool when my muscles were not working and I could literally drown. And I was just like, oh, don't even get me started on that, coach. And so that's how it manifests, is a lack of oxygen, which if severe enough and in a setting and it can't be treated, can lead to death. And for me, loss of mobility and numbing, and I can't feel my limbs. The most recent attack I had was this last summer. It was either spring or summer 2020, and I woke up I didn't wake up. So I started screaming. I couldn't feel my arms, my legs, or I started to lose feeling in my chest and my heart. And so I was screaming at the top of my lungs, it carried all the way through the house, even with closed doors. And my parents came up, and I woke up when my parents got to my room. So I woke myself up with my screaming and my parents coming. And so that was terrifying. And so huge breathing and just like typically physical. So I have to like rub against something to start to get feeling back and circulation back and that kind of thing in my appendages. So it can be terrifying. It will be a reason that I will take breaks from sports if I can't deal with the psychological, what happens if I have an asthma attack and how to pace myself. I have learned that I cannot just be like, go all out in a race. That doesn't work for me. I will get an asthma attack, speaking from experience. So I have to approach it as, and my fastest times I've ever gotten have been races that I have approached from I just need to finish this, oddly enough. So that works for me from experience. So that's kind of a weird thing. So I've learned to live with my asthma. The attacks are the terrifying part. The living with it on a daily basis and having difficulty getting oxygen, even when exercising, I just know to take it slow and to focus on finishing. And so in that way, I've adapted pretty well to asthma. To ADHD, I've always been, the word and how I know I've had it my whole life is I was extraordinarily hyper-focused child. So that's the ADHD there's a super strong hyper-focus component, which means I can focus on something for 12 hours uninterrupted with no medication, no drugs, no nothing like that. That's just naturally how I am. And so that I've always had, and the hyperactivity was really severe when I wasn't in sports as a kid. I was fortunate enough to be put in many sports, and so my ADHD didn't necessarily manifest itself in the attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the attention deficit component so bad until I stopped doing sports, because when I do sports, I get enough exercise that my hyperactivity dissipates. And why does that matter? Because if I'm hyperactive, then I have problems with keeping my attention. And so not necessarily always, because I get this hyper-focus thing where I can focus on something for 12 hours, but then I can't necessarily break a hyper-focus, so that also can be bad. Like, normal people can just focus on something for a certain amount of time. With ADHD, I don't necessarily get that choice. It's they're long hyperfocuses that can sometimes interfere with my sleep kind of thing. And then the attention deficit part is bad when I don't take care of my hyperactivity component. So I find 2 hours of exercise, a minimum of an hour and a half, really 2 hours of high intensity cardio is needed for me to have the attention deficit part greatly reduced. So it sounds pretty simple, but that means I'm getting 14 plus hours of cardio a week just to accommodate having my ADHD and functioning fully. And I suppose some people might call it non-impaired manner. So yeah, and it feels there's a huge difference in just functionality and ease of the brain function when I do take care of the hyperactivity with multiple hours of exercise a day. So I would say that is the most effective form of medication. I was on Adderall for about 6 years. I'm off of it, and I've been off of it for over 14 months. And where I needed it the most was with reading. I have difficulties reading, and that's something that my hyper focus does not kick in so well with. So medication for me was for reading, and so that's something I'm focusing on this year. Last year, 2020, I was off my medicine. I did not have medicine as a kid. I didn't stop sports until sports teams until college, and so that's when I started to realize, oh, I actually need that level of exercise that being on sports teams provided. And so then I wasn't getting that level of exercise, so then the medicine helped balance out that lack of exercise. But now that I'm off the medicine, I've made it more of a priority to get those exercise levels back up to multiple hours a day so that I can function at my best. And so this year, 2021, reading is the focus. 2020, it was writing as a form of reading. So when I write something, I read it to edit it. So it was kind of tricking myself into starting the reading, working on my reading. So that's this year. So stay tuned for updates as to ADHD and reading evolution, how I deal with reading with my ADHD.